right, welcome to the first TOKY Office Hours of 2026. This is January of 2026. Happy that you're able to join us, whether it's live with us today or on the video recap, which we are now publishing on our YouTube channel. So we are um, continuing to evolve TOKY Office Hours so that it is not strictly just a kind of online virtual meetup, but is a little bit of a hybrid between a kind of live video podcast that anyone who's able to attend can get the benefit of asking questions, but everyone else will be able to catch up with us online. So today, we are going to explore a little bit about podcasting and particularly the setup that we're using for the TOKY podcast called the Intangible Brand. So I've got a few slides to go through to kind of set things up and just talk a little bit about some of the philosophy behind how we have chosen to set things up. And then we're going to do a tour of the podcast studio and open it up to questions. So this is behind the scenes. I know sometimes when you see or hear you listen to a podcast or you watch a video on YouTube or a podcast that's a video on YouTube, you might wonder, how are they doing that? And it can be a little intimidating if you've never been involved in it before. And so I want to demystify a little bit of it and also really kind of help everyone understand that there's a spectrum to how you approach doing and producing a podcast. So what we're doing is one way of doing it, but it's not the only way that you can do it. So why do this behind the scenes tour? It's really looking at the front of the house versus the back of the house. You usually only see the finished product, and that's where the process can really make things feel intimidating. So we want to show the back of the house so that we can think about this as something that is doable. And as I said, is a bit of a spectrum. And there's no single professional setup that you need in order to do a podcast. It can be as simple as something very scrappy, a laptop, a simple microphone, and being able to hit record. That's as simple as it gets. It can be as complicated as having a full-on studio, even more sophisticated than what you're going to see that we're using. Something that has special rooms and sets that are built, and control rooms and staff and all these sorts of things. Our friends at Corgan in Dallas have a department that they call the Media Lab, and they produce a lot of video content, including their own podcast. And I've been in their space. It's a spectacular space. They have multiple people that are in a control room running it, and that's one way of doing it. It's a very high-end, high-quality production. They're spending a lot of time on the edit afterwards. They can do live broadcasts from it. It's really, really, really cool. But the other end can be something much less involved, and you can build up. So I think one of the things that we encourage folks that are interested in potentially doing a podcast or doing videos is to remind them that it's better to get started and then to incrementally build and to add and to adjust as you go. Because sometimes you don't even know exactly what it is that you're wanting to produce. TOKY Office Hours is a great example of that. We started this a little over a year ago. We had one particular idea that we were thinking about with it. But we're evolving and we're pivoting. In fact, we're taking some of our early episodes and we're going to be putting them online. And those were just simple Zoom recordings, where what you're seeing today is something a little bit more polished because we've been learning from what we're doing with the Intangible Brand podcast. So when you think about producing a podcast, I think the biggest challenge is really about reducing friction, not necessarily about quality. There are some elements of quality that we want to pay attention to. Audio is probably the biggest one of those. But I think the bigger thing is, how do you reduce friction in this process? And that's where we need to be mindful of people's time. It's really the most expensive input that we have in this process. So how do we make sure that when we have folks that are going to be guests or however you're deciding to produce your particular show, that the people's time that are involved is maximized? And it's also about consistency over polish. It's more important that there's regularity, whether that's monthly or weekly, or the way we do it for the podcast is biweekly. TOKY Office Hours is monthly, but it's consistent. We always drop a new episode of the podcast on Wednesday mornings every other week. And we always have TOKY Office Hours on the third or sometimes the fourth Thursday at noon Central. So that consistency, I think, matters a lot more than necessarily how polished things are. You can always continue to advance in the polish. So when we think about what's the guiding principle for how we're producing and thinking about our podcast, it's really about designing the system, not thinking so much about the edit. We try to our approach, and again, there's a spectrum of ways that you can do it. It can be highly scripted. It can be very off the cuff. It can involve a lot of post-production and editing. Last year, we had we talked a little bit about podcasts, and shared some examples that were more highly produced, a lot more editing and things that are taking place after the fact. And I think that's one of the things that can be intimidating when you're trying to get something off the ground. So we made the deliberate decision to try and do as much of the decisions and as much of the edit, if you will, ahead of time rather than trying to do it after the fact. So we record everything essentially in one take. So what you're seeing right now, whether it's Office Hours or it's the Intangible Brand Podcast, we're recording it exactly the same way. And this is everything that you see on the screen is exactly what's going to go into the show. We'll do a little bit of cleanup at the beginning and the ends. If someone bobbles something significantly enough that they want to stop and start over, we'll make an edit in between. Or if we have a technical difficulty, which happens sometimes, we may have to go back and do some editing. But we're not going in and trying to cut out portions of sentences or fix those types of things. So ultimately, we're trying to minimize what has to happen after the fact. And like I said earlier, we are prioritizing audio quality over everything else. Now, we want good video quality, but making sure that we have good microphones, that we have good quality audio coming in. And then probably the most deliberate thing we're doing in the editing process is using software to clean up the audio, make the levels sound good, make it sound rich. And for the audio only version, the software actually goes in and eliminates dead space or the ums and uhs that are parts of normal conversation. Those kinds of things are more noticeable and more annoying when you're listening to audio. You're in the car, you're on the treadmill, and there's a lot of ums and uhs and things, or dead spaces and pauses. That's the kind of thing, because you have no visual clue as to what's going on, that can be a little bit more aggravating or a little bit more challenging to listen to. So the software helps clean all that stuff up and make the audio version sound really good. We do a similar kind of sweetening on the video production side of it, but we don't take out those stutters and ums and ahs, partially because you don't need to do it as much, because you can see that, I'm thinking when I'm pausing and saying or what have you. And also because if there's a pause, like I'm thinking, like I'm doing right now, the video makes it clear that I'm thinking, that I'm processing. And so I'm not as hung up on that in the same way that I might be in the audio version. The other thing is if you take all of those things out, then you actually have to adjust the video, right? So I can't get out of sync. So if you cut out the or the ah or the dead space, then you start to have video that starts to be very choppy. And now you have to make more deliberate decisions in the editing process. And our guiding principle is to minimize the amount of editing that we have to do. Like I said, publishing consistently. When we started and launched the Intangible Brand, we had, I think, 4 or 5 episodes recorded before we ever published the first one. And that was really important for us to be able to hit the ground running, know that we were going to be able to publish consistently. We're always 6 to 8 weeks ahead in terms of recording episodes so that we never have to worry about whether or not we have an episode to come out every Wednesday. And just because we do it this particular way doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it that way. This is one way of doing it. So our setup is relatively complex on this side, as you're going to see, but it's designed to make everything simple on the back end. And once all of this is set up, it actually becomes pretty simple to manage and to maintain. So to give you a high level, before I start showing you things, the setup here is it's technically it's multi-camera. Now in the podcast here in the studio as one of 2 co-hosts, there's only one camera that I'm dealing with. I'm going to use a couple more cameras today in order to be able to show you the studio, but you could have multiple cameras. I could set up another camera and switch back and forth. If I were doing something solo, I might do that as a way to create visual interest during a video. But for the podcast, we don't really need to do that. So we do have multiple cameras though, because we have a guest and we have a co-host. And so we're bringing them in as separate cameras, even though they're not here in the studio. So I'm the only person in the studio. Our co-host is coming to us remotely, and our guests are coming to us remotely. So that is all facilitated through software called Ecamm. And we'll talk about software in a little bit, but Ecamm is what drives all of this, and it integrates with Zoom. So our guests are brought in with Zoom through Zoom. That's what we're doing right now. In fact, everything that you're seeing on the screen is being produced live through Ecamm, and all of you are here in Zoom. So I could actually, and I may do this, Alec, I'm going to pick on you in a second and may add you as a guest, and just to demonstrate how this might work. So I'm actually going to assign you to the guest 1 slot. And then I'm going to make a quick adjustment here to what that looks like. And so the third element that you're going to see in a minute is I'm controlling a lot of this through a device called a Stream Deck. So this is, and I'll show you a picture of it in a minute, but this is actually here, I can show you a picture of it right now. So this is the Stream Deck. Come on, there we go. So it's a little controller box. I actually have 2 of them here, and it has programmable buttons. So I'm able to click a button. For example, this one that says guest, I'm going to hit this button right now. And what's going to happen is Alec is going to come up, and he's zoomed in a little bit. Sorry about that, but I can fix that problem. So I can switch back and forth, or I can have a version where both of us are on screen at the same time. And I would have, if we were really going to have a show, all of those camera positions are fixed ahead of time. But all I'm doing is clicking these buttons to quickly move between what are called scenes in Ecamm. So these are all set up ahead of time, and I can just switch back and forth between them. And I can go back to my PowerPoint, and I'll show you how that's working in a second. So if I go back to my slides, so the guests are brought into through Zoom, and then everything is designed to operate in one take. So I'm able to just hit record and then switch between these scenes so that you may see myself and a co-host together at the beginning and end of the show. And then there's a scene that brings the third person in, and I've got a few variations on that to fit different situations. But it's relatively simple, but you can make it as complex as you want. So if you think about this concept of the spectrum, the same show, different setups, and thinking about that in practice, you're going to see the setup that I have, which is a more complex version of this. Carl, my co-host on the Intangible Brand, he is using a spare conference room at their office. He has a high quality webcam where I'm using an actual camera. He's using a high quality 4K webcam, and it's connected to a teleprompter. We'll talk about that in a second. And he has a good quality microphone, but it's a portable setup that he sets up in this conference room. They build a little backdrop for it, and he sets it up each time that we're going to record. It's not a permanent installation the way mine is. And then we also have guests and sometimes guest co-hosts. In the most recent recording that we did, we had a guest co-host, and she was using just the microphone on her laptop and the webcam on her laptop. And a lot of times, our guests are coming to us in similar kinds of situations, all the way up to, I mentioned Corgan, they came to us live from their studio. So when you watch those episodes on YouTube, you can see the difference in quality. It doesn't, of their inputs, it doesn't really matter. It looks good because everything that's around it looks nice. And you get good quality, and then that audio sweetening that we're doing really helps to make everyone sound really good. So if we think about that production flow, then the before, the during, the after. The before is really the most important part. First, getting all of this set up. Now that it's set up, it's relatively simple to do each episode, but there's a lot of work that goes into that upfront. So communication with the guests, outreach to find guests that you want to have on the show, because we've made the choice that our show is an interview-based podcast. Not every show needs to be that. Some shows are just one person talking to the camera. In other cases, it may be two people who come together with no guests, but they have a conversation each week about a particular topic. In other cases, it might be something more like what you might hear from NPR that's more storytelling, highly produced. So for us, the work ahead of time is really about prepping the guest. We make sure that we develop the script and a set of questions, and we share those questions ahead of time with the guest so that they can be as prepared as possible. Our goal is not gotcha journalism. We want to make sure that guests have the opportunity to really think through what they want to say and how they're answering. And we're doing a lot of work ahead of time, reading the books that they've written or looking at content that they have produced, because we're making a choice with each person that we bring on. We're looking for someone who's going to provide value to our audience. So we want to make sure that the questions that we're asking is really digging into what is that value that they're going to be able to provide to our audience, and then do that in as conversational a tone as possible. So then, as I said, during is really the easy part in many ways. We're recording live. We're making a few decisions in real time, but not much. We have a script that we're following, but it's pretty loose. The openings are very scripted. The closing is very scripted. Doesn't need to be. That's just our preference to make sure that we say what we want to say. And when I show you in a minute the setup, one of the advantages to the teleprompter is that I can have that script on the screen, and that allows me to be able to look into the camera and deliver that message. Now, what I'm doing today is far more off the cuff. There is no script. This is just a PowerPoint presentation to help organize our thoughts and give everyone something to react to, but it's a lot more off the cuff. So you have a lot of options here. But we really like having the guests prepared, and then we don't have as many decisions to make in real time. And then afterwards, we're doing the final production. It's a light edit, as I said. We're trying to do as minimal editing to the video as possible, doing that audio sweetening process, and then we go through publishing and promoting it. And that's really the process. And, shout out to Grace, who's on the call today, who does a lot of the heavy lifting in the before and the after to make sure that we're ready to go at showtime, and that the episodes get posted to YouTube, posted to all of the podcast channels, and promoted appropriately. So, digging in a little bit on the post production, the editing, and the publishing parts of this, as I said, we publish both an audio and a video version. We use Adobe Premiere for the video editing, mostly because we're an Adobe Creative Suite shop. Our folks know how to use the tool. It's honestly, in many ways, overkill for what we're doing, and there's a lot of different kinds of tools out there for audio editing. In fact, one that I'm looking at right now is called Descript, and it's really cool because it can do text-based audio editing, meaning you can go and look at a transcript and actually edit the video by making cuts in the transcript. So we're always exploring new, better, simpler ways to do what we're doing. The audio production, again, it's one edit to multiple outputs. The only thing that we're doing additionally is for the promotion. We create a few different 30-second versions. We have a format for that. So as our editor is going through and as Grace is going through and reviewing the transcript, we're identifying some quotes from our guest that we can use in those 30-second promos. So that's really the only other thing that we do. Now, the audio sweetening is with a platform called Auphonic. It's on the screen there. And we're able to take and output the audio tracks once we do whatever minimal editing that we're doing in Premiere. We output those audio tracks and we just upload them to Auphonic. And we have a couple of presets that we've created in their tool. Really easy to do, probably created the presets in 10 minutes. Some very simple decisions about what do we want to cut or how do we want to sweeten the audio. And what's cool is it just goes through, and for the audio-only podcast version, it cuts out those blank spaces and the ums and the ahs. It reduces any extraneous noise. So if, for example, in the space that I'm in right now, the air conditioner is on and there's that hum that comes from that, it just eliminates that entirely. It gives a little bit more presence and clarity to the audio, particularly for those who might not be on the highest quality microphones. And then for the video, we do exactly the same thing, except we're not making any cuts. So we're not taking out those pauses or the stutters. And then once we have those produced, we're publishing the audio through Buzzsprout. So that's our platform so that we don't have to go. You can't publish it directly to Apple or Spotify or what have you. You need to have a place where you're hosting the audio. And so there's a number of different platforms that are out there. And we chose to use Buzzsprout. They had a lot of great tools, pretty inexpensive for what our needs are. It scales with you as you grow. And then we're directly publishing the video to our YouTube channel. So, some intentional trade-offs as we've been thinking about how do we, produce this, or in other words, what are the things that I obsessed over and what did I not obsess over in the process? So, really, what I care about most is audio. I have a good friend who has done a lot of video production over the years, and he always reminds his clients that audio is 80% of how you feel about a video. So if the audio isn't good, it doesn't matter how good the image is on the screen, you're going to think that the video is garbage. If the audio sounds great, but the video is kind of mid, that's going to be fine. They're able to hear and it sounds good, so it really helps it actually look good. What we don't care about perfect takes, and we don't care about trying to get in there and do heavy editing. This isn't about that kind of polish. It's much more about having a conversation with our guest, with my co-host, with all of you. So that is, it's fine, right? It's a conversation, so it doesn't need to be pitch perfect. If I were delivering something different, if I were doing training, for example, we could use the exact same setup, but we might pay a bit more attention in the editing process to make sure that it's at that high level of quality, because it's not as ephemeral. It's not something that you listen to once and then you're gone. It's something that's going to be reused time and time again. And I think that the constraints that we put ourselves under are really kind of a feature, not a flaw. It's a feature because it has enabled us to get something off the ground relatively rapidly and to be consistent in producing it. If we went overboard in our production, we might get tired of it. We might start to fall behind. We might not hit that consistency mark. So I'm hoping that, this conversation, and this behind the scenes is, something that'll unlock for you or for folks who see this video later, that this is one way of doing it. You don't have to start here, but it's a great place to start. But ultimately, the right setup for doing a podcast is the one that you're actually going to use and the one that provides real value to the person who is listening or watching. So this is really just one way to do it. All right, so let's talk a little bit. Well, I'm going to come back to these uh, next two slides in a second. I want to now switch and kind of show you what's going on in the studio. So um, what you're seeing now. I'm going to switch back to this view. What you're seeing now is a very carefully curated look, right? We want a background that is a certain way, that has a certain feel to it. That's not necessarily what this room looks like. In fact, if I, let's see, I'll go back to the presentation for a second and I'll just show you a picture. So this is a picture of the background. So what I'm in front of, and just some interesting quirks to point out here. First of all, this room is, a concrete block room. There's, poles for lights. You're going to see some more in a second. The furniture that's behind me is actually on an angle. It's not flush and square the way that you would put furniture into an actual room. And that's intentional because that's what makes it look the way it does behind me. So if I go back to this view, um, that's what gives it the kind of angles and look behind me. If it was lined up exactly in the corners, it would look strange. I know because I tried it that way to begin with. The other thing is, even the things that are placed on shelves are not necessarily placed in the where you would. So if I go back to this view, um, oops. Oh, there we go. And actually, let me see if I can do a wider view. I may have, let's see, I've got a main. Nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. Where is it? Well, I thought I had one, so we'll just skip that for now. But what I was going to say is um, even the elements that are on the shelves are not necessarily put where you would put them if you were decorating your office. They're placed there because that's how they show up best on camera. So I spent a lot of time with once the camera was set, actually moving things around so that they showed up on camera in a good way. Background, I think, is one of the ways that you can create the vibe of the space. Um, all right, so let me show you what's happening in front of me. So this overhead view, and I'm going to roll out of the way just a little bit. So this on my right hand side, this really really large monitor. This is where the presentation is that I'm presenting. The PowerPoint. You can, in fact, if I switch here. If I switch here, you can see there's the PowerPoint up in the top. So I'm actually, when I'm sharing that, just sharing a portion of that screen. When I'm working in this room, this is my working monitor. And I actually have multiple places on here that I could bring something up to share on screen. This screen that's directly in front of me here, and let's see if I can give you a better view. This is the control panel. So I'm able to, this is everything that you see on here is Ecamm. This is the software that is running the production. And this is my control. So when I'm switching or fixing the view when I was messing around with how Alec looked in the camera view. This is how I'm doing that when I'm looking at comments. So if one of you were to make a comment, Grace made a test comment earlier, I can hit a button, and this is a touch sensitive screen, so I can just tap this and it'll bring that comment up on the screen. And I can change which cameras are visible and all of that on here. So this is the control panel. And then if I zoom in, so in the middle of the screen, and I'll zoom in on this, this is the teleprompter. So this is a product from Elgato. This is the XL version. And then there's also, I'll show you in a minute, when we started this, we started with their small version, which is about a third of the size of this. So what is behind this is the camera. So the way that this works is at the bottom is a monitor. It's a computer monitor connected to my computer system, and it is reflected in the mirror or it's like glass that is angled. So that top part that you're seeing with the hood around it is an angled piece of glass that's reflecting what's on the monitor down below. And behind it, you can't really tell in this image, but it's clear, and the camera sits directly behind that. So as I'm looking directly into this, I'm looking directly into the camera. And this is what helps with that webcam situation. We've all been on Zoom calls and the webcam's sitting up here, and so you're always looking up or you're looking down or wherever your webcam is, but it never feels like you're looking at the person that you're talking to. And the teleprompter has really two primary uses here, and the first of which is to allow me to look at whoever it is that I'm talking to. So you can see the teleprompter there, and uh, let me show you. I've got a picture of what's behind that. So let me go back to the presentation for a second. So this is a photo just of the desk, maybe makes it a little bit more clear. Directly in the center, right above the clock, is the teleprompter. Above that is a secondary monitor where I can see whatever it is. And it may be something that somebody's sharing in a Zoom, or it might be notes that I have. In this case, it's giving me a view of these extra cameras. So I've got one little camera right here. That's what was just showing us the prompter. And then behind me, up above, is the camera that sort of has the bird's eye view, and we'll go back to that in just a second. This is a close-up of the teleprompter, and if you look in the center, you can kind of see a ring right to the side of the Y in yes. You're seeing the lens of the camera behind the image. And then this is a bit of a close-up of what's on the screen. We can look at that again in a second, but this is what's on my control screen. And then here is, nope, not that one, this one. So here you can see the teleprompter from the side. So it's sitting on a tripod behind the desk. I've got you can see the heavy blankets. So I've got some poles set up, and in order to help dampen the sound in this room from the rest of the office, we have these heavy blankets that act as a kind of curtain. So the teleprompter sitting there, and you can see just behind it is the camera. So this is a Sony A6400 with a 16 to 35 millimeter lens on it, that's mounted behind this teleprompter. But you could just as easily have put a webcam there. So when Carl is co-hosting with me, he's using a smaller version of the teleprompter. So let me see if I can switch to a different view for a second. So you can kind of see this is a smaller version of the big teleprompter. This is what we started with, and this is what Carl is using. And this hole in the back of it, there's a plate, and you can mount a camera. We used the Sony originally with this, but Carl has a webcam mounted here. He uses one that comes from the same company, Elgato, but you can use any high-quality webcam there. And you can see the glass, so it acts as a mirror for what's on this little monitor right here. So these are really beneficial because um, I'm able to additionally bring up my a script. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So let me switch back to a different view. So now you're seeing what was on the screen, and here's the script. So as I start the podcast, welcome to the Intangible Brand, where we explore the connection between employee experience and client experience, and so forth. Right. So I'm able to scroll through this, and all the notes for the questions that we're going to ask all appear right here, and I'm able to switch back and forth between the view from the teleprompter, and you'll notice that it is kind of transparent, so you can see what's happening behind it. So I'm able to see my guest behind those words, but I'll also switch back and forth between those two views. So I'll switch so that you can see each of the different views, and I'm doing that with a foot pedal. So if I go back to my presentation here, and let me hide this. So also from this same company, I really like Elgato's stuff. The Stream Deck, the little buttons that I was showing you earlier, they make those in a number of different sizes and versions. And one of the versions that they make is this pedal. So this is really 3 pedals, left, middle, and right. And I use these to be able to switch between the teleprompter view and the camera view. So I can quickly, unobtrusively, without having to look anywhere else, switch between those 2 views. And it makes it really, really easy. So that's what's happening there. Now, from a um, um, audio perspective, you see the microphone, and let's see, I'll go back to my wide view. You get a little bit better view of this. This is a Shure SM7B. Honestly, it's one of the most popular microphones for podcasting. You'll see these on video podcasts all the time. It's not the only one out there. This is not what Carl uses. It's not what a lot of other people use. There's great microphones from a lot of different companies. I happen to like the way this one sounds. It does have a few peculiar quirks in terms of how you connect it to your system. So this particular microphone, you'll see this big cable connected to it. This is called an XLR connector, similar to what professional musicians' microphones and guitars are connected with. That's not going to connect directly into your computer. So instead, I have this device. I'm going to show you. Let's see here. Go back to here. So this is called a Rodecaster, and this device is what controls the audio. So I have 2 different microphones connected to this. I primarily use the one that you see on screen. I have another boom mic that I can use for other things that's also connected to this. And then the audio for Zoom is routed through it. So this gives me some control. So if I wanted to mute myself without having to fiddle around with the Zoom settings, there's just a mute button. And now you can. So if I need to clear my throat or cough or something, I'm able to do that pretty easily and unobtrusively. So that's a pretty simple way of controlling the speakers, the microphone, and then the earphones. So I'm using in-ear monitors. I don't want to get the bleed from speakers. Now, Zoom handles that pretty well. And in fact, in your day-to-day use of Zoom, you don't notice the fact that if you're just using the speakers on your computer and the microphone on your computer, Zoom is doing the magic of making sure that you're not getting feedback and echo from that. But when you're doing a production like this, it's nice to make sure that that's not going to happen. So the Rodecaster allows me to connect the microphone and these in-ear monitors and speakers, but I can turn the speakers down and just hear myself and whoever I'm communicating with on these in-ear monitors. But in other cases, some of our guests will be wearing headphones, some will not. We encourage them to, but it's not absolutely necessary. Some will have a separate microphone, some don't. The microphone that Carl uses plugs directly into his computer using USB. There's some really great microphones that do that out there as well. So then lighting, for video, lighting is the other really important thing. You want to make sure that you have good bright light. And I can tell you sitting in here, the light feels way brighter than what you would expect that you need. But as a photographer, you learn that light is the most important thing to getting a good image. So we have a few different lights that are set up in here. So the primary lights, and let me go back to the wide view for a second. So, and I'm going to change the perspective on this. Hopefully, let's see if this works. So I'm going to go really wide. So now you're getting an even wider view of the entire studio. You can see that over on this side, and actually it's on this side as well. You just can't see it in this shot. We have a number of foam panels up on the wall. That's just to help to make sure that the sound doesn't have a lot of echo in the room. Most of the light that's hitting me is coming from this giant lantern that's sitting up here, and I'll show you a better view of that in just a second. So this is a kind of soft box, and there's a light connected to that. And then there's a second light that's up above it that is providing an effect that I'll show you in just a second. Over here on the right-hand side, there's a smaller light. So this is the big lantern is the key light, and then this on this side is the fill light. So I'm getting most of the light on one side of my face, and then I'm getting a little bit of fill light from this on the other side of my face, so it doesn't go completely dark, but I still am three-dimensional because I've got differences in the amount of light that's coming in. And then if I go back and look at the photos, so I showed you. Let's see. So that's the front view. So if we look at the view behind me, you'll notice up in the top there's another light panel up there. I'll give you a close up of that. So this is what's called a hair light, and that is really just falling across my shoulders, the back of my head, and a little bit on my shoulders to create a little bit of separation from the background. And I have, just because I'm a nerd and I love this stuff, I rather than trying to go and turn all these lights on individually, I have little outlet switches that's all controlled through a remote. So I can press one button and all the lights turn on and all the lights turn off in here, which makes it really easy to get started quickly. And if I go back and I look at the room as a whole, there's also what we call practical lights. So there's lights inside of the cabinet here behind me, and you can see them a little bit more when I'm in. Oh, I'm not showing my screen. Sorry. Let's do this again. So you can see there's lights inside of the cabinet, and including this little crow here in the second that's holding a light. And if I go back to uh, the view of me, you can see some of those lights there. And so those are called practical lights. They're not actually creating any of the light on me. It's just sort of some of the ambiance. And one of those elements of ambiance is here in the corner. So let me go back and show you this. So you see that plant that's back behind me. Here's here's a close-up of that plant and what's happening behind it. So this effect that looks like there's a window in the room, that a light is coming in and shining on the other side, and it has the grid of the elements of the window, that's entirely fake. So what's really cool about how this is set up is we can record anytime. This studio is going to look exactly the same at 7 in the morning, at noon, if it's snowing outside, if it's midnight, it doesn't matter. Everything looks the same, and it looks like we have the same light coming in. And the light that you see on the left-hand side of the screen, we have two of those. One of those has the softbox, that lantern mounted to it. You can see it here in this photo. And then the other one that's up above it has what's called a gobo, which is basically like just a little metal disc that has the shape of that window. And so it's projecting that light back there on the plant and on that wall. So it's just ways of creating some dimension in the studio. Let's see. What else do I need to show you? So we've talked about, let's go back to the list. So, from a hardware perspective, I mentioned the camera, the Sony A6400 with a 16 to 35 lens sitting on a tripod. We're controlling it with these Stream Decks. I've got the prompter in front of me. The camera itself connects into the computer through another Elgato device called a Cam Link, just because you have to translate what's on the camera into something that the computer can use. Webcams don't have that problem. I talked about the key light over here on the right-hand side, the microphone, which is on this little arm that lets me move it around, the in-ear monitors, the Rodecaster, and then these are the lights that we're using. So that's the basic hardware other than the Mac. So the software that we're using. So we are Mac based. I run all of this off of my MacBook Pro. You could use a Mac Mini or Mac Studio computer, whatever you wanted. You can also do this on a PC. You won't be able to use Ecamm because Ecamm is Mac only software, but there are a number of great alternatives out there. vMix and OBS are very similar in concept to Ecamm and what I'm doing with that. Riverside and StreamYard are actually really great platforms, particularly if you want to do just audio podcasts and you sort of want everything all in one. Then those are great platforms that handles, you don't need to worry about Zoom. They've got everything for bringing your guests in, doing some of the editing. So really nice all-in-one kinds of subscription platforms. I mentioned Auphonic. That's our online AI-driven sound, engineer that's fixing the audio. The music that we use at the beginning of the show, at the end of the show, in our ads and things comes from a royalty-free music source that we highly recommend called Epidemic Sound. As I mentioned, we use Adobe Premiere for video editing, and we're looking at Descript as another possibility. And then we use Buzzsprout as our podcast publishing platform. So I think that is pretty much the tour. So I will open it up to questions if anyone has any questions.
How many different mics did you play around with before you landed on where you're at? I feel like I saw a few different ones.
Um, yeah. So I bought the Shure pretty early on. I actually bought it used. I bought a number of things used on Facebook Marketplace. People get into this
Mhm.
business and then they get out. So I bought the Shure early on, and the Shure has an interesting challenge to it. So, and this gets into the nerdy world of microphones, but when you have a microphone that is not powered, particularly like the ones that are USB powered that plug directly into the computer, they need power supplied to them. It's called phantom power. So you need to plug them into a device. And the Shure actually tends, depending on what you're plugging it into, tends to need more boost than even that. So I actually bought what's called a cloud lifter to plug into it to give it all that boost. And early on, I wasn't sure that I really wanted this look, of having the microphone right in front of me. And the thing with this kind of microphone is it doesn't work as well if you're not right in front of it. Like, it works really great when you're right on top of it, but the further and further that you get away, it does not work like a shotgun mic, and so you start to get echo and you start to get less quality in the sound. So the reason that you see podcasters or broadcasters with the microphone right up in front of them is because they're using this type of microphone. Now, I also have, hang on, whoops, sorry, give me one second. Live production, folks. So if I switch back to this view, maybe this one's, hang on, let's switch it up here to something a little wider. Will that show it? Well, it sort of shows it. So this is a boom mic, or a shotgun
Mhm.
mic. It does a really good job at directionally, picking up your voice from a somewhat further distance away, but it's not a long distance away. So in order for this to work, it kind of has to be like right here. and now it's coming disconnected, so I'm just gonna leave it alone. Let it hang down there and go back to this. So I liked the idea of it being up and out of the view so that there was no microphone in the shot. I could never get the audio to sound as good as this does. And so
Mm.
going back to sort of what our priorities were, my priority was to make sure that the audio was great. So I ended up just going with the Shure. So it was really just those two. I have wireless lavalier mics. So you'll see a lot of podcasters, particularly vloggers and folks that are out kind of doing remote stuff, and they'll have microphones that they clip on, and some of those sound really good. I have a set of the DJI wireless lavalier mics that we use for other purposes. We could use them for this quite easily. I don't. I think that this
Mhm.
sounds better. So
If you were forced to, and I know you like, you have a propensity to like nicer things, but if you were forced to give like a ballpark range for a starter kit, like what do you think a budget would be for most people to get a relatively decent podcast setup going?
oh, I guess it really depends. Sorry, I'm just futzing with your camera because I can.
Oh, I was
Um,
wondering what the
yeah, I since you're talking, I thought we might as well get you back on screen. Um, and yeah, so this is all live, right? I'm messing with this stuff like right here. And I can use my mouse or I can use my finger because this is touch screen. This is a relatively new addition. So I'm always like messing around with this stuff because as Alex said, I like the gear as much as anything. Um, okay, ballpark. Um, So again, I think it depends on the spectrum question, right? So you could get started for, you know, really no money except for a couple subscriptions. You need to publish your podcast, so you need a subscription to something like Buzzsprout. You need to be able to record it, so you can do something like Riverside. And actually, I haven't looked at it recently. I think Riverside may actually have the necessary tools for doing the publishing, so it's kind of an all-in-one solution. So you might be talking about $50 a month or something, and then you're using the microphone that's on your AirPods, and you're good to go, right? And that's a certain quality level. You're using the webcam on your computer, or whatever you're using. Now, take it a step up, and let's talk about like what Carl is using. So he's got the little teleprompter sitting on a little tabletop tripod. That teleprompter is a couple $100. He's got uh, the Elgato 4K face cam webcam, which is a couple $100. I think you can get them in a bundle for let's
Mhm,
say maybe $400. And then he's got a microphone, and that microphone may have run 150.
mhm.
So you can get good ones for much less than that, right? So
Did Carl have a propensity for this stuff too, or did you
no,
go set up his
I picked his stuff out for him, and uh, to get him up and running. Carl is a great architect and a great people person. He'd be the first one to say he's not a technical person.
Yeah,
Um,
that
but
would have been my guess.
but it wasn't that hard. I mean, I didn't even need to necessarily go to Raleigh to help set it up. I was able to talk him through it remotely. So let's see. I'm looking at Amazon here. Let's see what Gato prompter. So the small one that I was showing you is 228. Um, they've got a bundle with like an arm that it can sit on
Mhm.
for 323. You can get it with see if they have one with the camera. They usually do. Oh, let me click on this. It's probably right here. Well, no, of course not. Um, and there's other brands out there as well. I'm not seeing their camera, but I mean, I've gotten other high quality 4K webcams for under $100. So you could do with the setup that Carl's doing, and it's going to look and sound really good for under $500, I would say.
Yeah, that's nuts, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have thought I'd been at least double that, at
No.
least.
Now, do a setup like this, it's going to be a lot
Yeah.
more, right? I've got all the monitors, I've got the larger prompter, I've got the other camera, I've got lights all over the place. We're definitely multiple thousands of dollars into building this out. But we are intending to use and are using it for more than one thing, right? So we're using it for the podcast, we're using it for office hours, I'm using it for presentations and meetings. And we're going to be doing later this year, we're going to be doing some online training. So we'll record that training with with this kind of setup as well. So it'll more than pay for itself,
Yeah.
from that perspective.
Go. I gotta jump, Jerry. Got a
Yeah,
1
this
o'clock
has
I
been
gotta get
great.
to.
Yep. All right. I think that's a wrap for today. Thank you all for being a part of TOKY Office Hours, and look forward to seeing folks next month. All right. Thanks.